What does it feel like to hear from God? Most people play by the rules society gives us.
What is a moment that you realized writing new rules would demand everything from you?
You can be what you've been designed to be, not what you hope to be. We have to write new rules.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here with our wonderful host, Adrian. How are you doing today?
I am doing well, Bri. New year, same me.
I know. This drop is going to be dropping in 2025.
2025.
Is it January 1st, the day that we drop? The first day of January of 2025.
There it is. So no better way to get your year started than with the New Rules crew. So yeah, I'm excited.
I'm really excited for today's episode.
All right.
I have many questions for you.
Wow. Okay. This is going to be fun.
I thought it would be great to start off the new year with an episode on the genesis of new rules. I don't think that we've ever done an episode on that. I think maybe we've mentioned things here and there. We talk a lot about authenticity, but this is the New Rules Podcast. We are New Rules Collective. We write new rules. So I think it would be great to talk a little bit about the genesis of that.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start off where the idea started. I know it was a really special and unique and unexpected moment where this idea came to you. So can you just paint the picture for us? What were you feeling? What were you watching? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I was at my good friend Kyler Hall's house. Shout out to Kyler. He was, we were watching the NBA Finals. It was 2013, and it was, I can't remember, it was San Antonio. I know the San Antonio Spurs, and I can't remember if they were playing the Cleveland Cavs, whoever they were playing. And I'm sitting there, I'm on his couch. I would usually go over there while I watch, when he lived here, I'd go over his house usually on Thursdays, or we love watching NBA together. So I was just over there, and I'm sitting on his couch, and all of a sudden, it's like, I think it's halftime or something. So, we're just kind of talking, not really paying attention to the halftime show. And all of a sudden I see Jay-Z pop up on the screen. So, Jay-Z being, my favorite artist, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing Pharrell, and I'm seeing Swiss Beats, and I'm seeing
Rick Rubin
as well.
Right?
Yeah. And I'm like, and he's talking, and I'm like, what is going on? You know what I mean? Because, at that point in time, people, he was dropping albums here and there, but he hadn't dropped the album in a minute. So I was like, what is this? I thought maybe it's some new product, whatever. And so then all of a sudden, this was at the height of streaming and, and people starting to, whether if it was, still doing, ripping stuff, whatever, but it was starting to become on that time of iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff. And so he made a statement. And so he's talking about his album. So what it was a Samsung commercial. And, he's always kind of been ahead of certain things. And so what he did with the new Samsung Galaxy, I think it was coming out, he was going to put his new album. So anybody who got the Samsung Galaxy would get the album. I think it was 3 or 4 days, or maybe it's a week before anybody else could get it. If you bought the Galaxy, it was already pre-downloaded on the phone. And so I'm intrigued, because I love his music. But then he makes this statement. He was like, man, he's like, the music industry right now is like the Wild Wild West. We have to write new rules. And in that moment, I can't really explain it. It was just, it really, this is just what I felt and kind of what happens. It was like everyone kind of left. I was still in the room, and I say everybody left, everybody was still in there. It wasn't I was it was kind of those moments where you feel like everything went silent and people were in the room. But I was looking at the TV, and those two words, that idea of new rules, we got to write new rules. And there was kind of a moment where I knew that, and the best way I explain it is that my creator speaking through this conduit of a TV, and it was I knew that's what it was. It was just something inside of me to where I knew this was more than just, oh, it's just a phrase. We hear catchphrases and things like that, but there was something about that, and from that moment was really the genesis of this idea of new rules, and that's where it started.
Okay, so you're sitting on the couch.
Yeah, I'm sitting on the couch. Yep.
What do you realize that is a significant moment, or are you just oh, that's crazy?
I didn't, it wasn't in that moment I was like, oh man, hey, you're going to have this business podcast, all this stuff. No, I just felt inside it was more than just a moment. I've had those feelings, I've had those moments a couple different times. I've had those moments when I felt like I was supposed to move back to Tallahassee. I had those moments when in 2000, almost 20 years, 2004, I thought I was going to like, hey, the idea of eventually maybe pastoring and planning a church. I had that idea of starting a basketball academy. I mean, all those things. I've had moments where I'm like, okay, I know this is significant. So that's what it was. It's like, I just knew this moment was incredibly significant.
And you mentioned, how old were you?
I was, let me think right now. Sorry, I got to go back. I'm getting old.
You mentioned it was 2013.
Yeah, so that makes me now, I was 35.
Okay, so that's crazy. I'm going to explain why. I didn't know this. I didn't know that it was 2013. I didn't put two and two together. But for those of you that don't know, New Rules is it's more of a movement than it is an organization. It's a culmination of faith space, conferences, consulting, some sports arenas, and Engage, which is the church that you pastor and founded.
Yep.
That started in 2013 as well.
It did start in 2013. Matter of fact, Engage. No, was it 2013? Yeah, we're in 2014 now. No, yeah, it was 2013. No.
We're in 2014 now.
No, I'm sorry. My brain's going. It was 2013, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that Engage. It was 2012.
I think so. We're planning for our birthday party in January, and everything I've seen says established 2013.
Okay, perfect. There it is.
So hopefully
cool.
we're right
yeah,
on
you're
that,
right.
and we're not.
Yeah, no.
Off.
Yeah. 2013. 2013 it actually happened, and so it started in January, and I want to say this was in like June of like somewhere around the June of 2013.
Okay, so you're 35.
Yeah,
that's really young, in my opinion. You're finding a church, founded a church. You have this moment with New Rules. Do you realize or can conceptualize at any level what you want these things to turn into yet?
I used to just always, I would have these different things I would think about them. And what I knew was that I started recognizing a pattern that I would do things different, to where I didn't see the world a certain way. I was one of those people to where I knew that, like, why I think maybe as I started pondering this more, this idea of New Rules, was because I always had to, like, to be in the places of writing like New Rules, thinking different. My whole life has kind of been that way. And so I had ideas of like, man, maybe one day I could, it could be multiple, faith spaces. Maybe one day it could be, I had no idea about doing like consulting and coaching. I had no idea about, some of the new stuff, that we're actually going to do, which we may talk about today. Like, I had no idea of those things. It was just like, I just knew I wanted to be in spaces to like really change things. And so I thought maybe it'd be in the basketball space. I didn't know, but that was kind of where we're at.
What do you think was inside of you to hear the statement, the Wild Wild West statement? He said before something about like, there's a lot of old dudes writing old rules. Like, we need to write the new rules. When you hear that, what happened inside of you that thought, I'm the person to do that? And did you think that?
You know what? It wasn't like I was like, oh my gosh, hey, I'm the one that's special. I was just like, it was just like, no, man, like he said it. And I was like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm supposed to help like write new rules. And it was never on some like, hey, like on like some global scale or some whatever. I was like, whatever that looks like, I don't know. But I just know I'm supposed to do that. And on top of it, it's like I have been doing that. But it was just like, I felt like it was like this like accelerant in my life of like, no, this is what you're called to. Because up until that point, I'd just been studying about people doing things different. That was like at the rise of like during that time as well. 2010, I read the book by Andy Crouch called Culture Making. And it's the idea of how we were really designed to create and make culture. Then somebody who I really admire as an artist by the name of Lecrae, who really dropped what he called he dropped one of his first mixtape called Church Clothes, which was literally, I tell people, it's like if you could put like my life like into like an album, it was like this combination of like, his deep faith, but also just like, Don Cannon did the DJ did it. It was like the remix, but it was like, it wasn't this, it was faith, but it was definitely, man, it was just incredible. The production was phenomenal. I mean, it was just, and it was a shift and change in music when he actually dropped that. And so then I just started, it was all these things I was starting to watch things start to change in general. And I'd always been this person where I'm like, I felt like I was supposed to live in this, like kind of this like kind of meshing point of like faith and culture future and all that. And I was like, oh, this is kind of where I'm at. So it was all these things kind of culminate up into that point in time. And I was doing that because we had started Engage, and then I was still running my basketball academy at that time.
One of the reasons why I wanted to dive into the moment itself is because I think that a lot of us have moments like that. We just don't have the self-awareness to realize that they're happening. So they can just kind of pass us by.
Yeah.
And so I was just curious about how that hit you, what you're thinking in the moment. I do think it's a little bit different because of your faith. That can make the experience different. But I also think it's something that anybody can access.
Absolutely.
Would you say that you have other moments that are like that throughout your life? Does it happen often? I
had moments where I felt those moments were different. You know what I mean? I could look back to when a pivotal moment in my life is when I went to the NBA Players Association camp. It was the first one they ever did, and there was guys like Kobe Bryant and others were there, and I was like one of the top 150 players in the country, and by the time I left, I was like in the top 25. It was one of those moments where I was there, like, when it was going on, it seemed like this outer body experience how I was playing. I mean, I was a good player, but it was just like, best way to explain, like I was in a dream state. It was like everything I did, I just knew this was going to work. It was just like, it was just one of those things as a player, what they call, you hit the zone and you were there. So that was a moment where I knew things would really shift for me. When I came and went to Florida State, it was a shift for me. I wasn't a person of faith. I actually played my first year at the University of Tulsa. We were going to be really good. I planned on staying there, but my head coach took the job here, and I was like, I'll go visit, whatever. And so I came to visit, and I was planning on staying, even at the end of my visit, I was planning on staying at Tulsa. And the night before I went to bed, I mean, I just, I knew, hey, you pray, you do stuff like that. And so I was like, God, what should I do? And honestly, I woke up the next morning, and it was like I just had this overwhelming like peace about going to Florida State when the night before I was planning on staying. And so like that was a pivotal moment for me. And so I've had just moments like that throughout my life of where knowing that and that's just now having hindsight, I can look back on them and I can explain them clear. During those times, I just like, okay, I know something's different. I couldn't explain it this clear. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. But I just knew those moments I felt something and I was like, okay, this is different. And then it went from there.
There's this quote by Parker J. Palmer. It says, before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, listen for what it intends to do with you. Before you tell your life what truths and values you have decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody and what values you represent. And the reason why I read that quote is just to emphasize the part where I mentioned, I think that people have experiences like this. They just don't have the self-awareness to realize it. It's the idea of your life is speaking to you, but you do have to just listen to it. So maybe it's not, if you're a listener, that you have moments where you're thinking like, I'm going to disrupt the world by creating this movement. Maybe it doesn't look like that, but there are patterns and there are sovereign themes in your life that are showing up through moments just like Adrian is experiencing. And when we talk about self-awareness, we're talking about the practice of being able to be present enough to be aware when those moments are happening to you. Yeah, absolutely. Because what ends up happening in those moments is that like, it was, like I said, with the new rules, it was the idea of hearing something and I was like, oh, new rules. And it stuck out to me, but also the evidence of like actually my life during that time, because it was like, oh, I was doing that. And that was a desire of mine. My desire was always, I don't want to go with the status quo. I started being able to have enough awareness, realize my life has always kind of been like this disruptor. I've always been in situations where I was doing that, even though I wasn't trying to actually disrupt anything. I was just, doing life or doing whatever. And, even simple things like my junior year where my best friends and all of us went to the same high school together. And we had a group together. It was like, we were like tight together. And my junior year, and then the coach we really wanted to be our coach gets the job. But I literally felt the best thing to do was to transfer. And it caused literal hell among my friends, among people in our city, because I left our city to go outside of our city. It was all this stuff. And my friends even felt betrayed that I did that. But it was like the best thing. So it was like, I wasn't trying to be disruptive. It was just one of those moments where I just intuitively leaned into it or whatever. And so that was kind of it. So again, those moments, yes, when your life starts to speak and you can see what you do, then you start to become aware of like, oh, that kind of ties to it. That kind of ties to it. And it kind of goes from there. As the idea of writing new rules has evolved over time, what problems have emerged that they have spoken to in a similar way of the moment that you experience with the Jay-Z commercial, and you're thinking, that's the thing that I need to disrupt and write new rules within?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that one that comes top of mind is in 2020, when I was, I don't know if I've said it on this podcast, but we were in Destin. And I was sitting out there. It was right at the beginning of COVID. So, we were here in Florida. So, that was just like, people just like COVID rules were just kind of European traffic laws. You know what I'm saying? They were just kind of like, just barely, people pay attention if they wanted to. So we were out there. There's all these people on the beach and there's all this stuff going on. And I'm sitting there with like Peyton, and I'm like looking over there. And that week, George Floyd was murdered. And I just was like, yeah, I'm done. This whole multi-ethnic space thing and building multi-ethnic. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm done. This is a waste of time. People are going to do what they want. Doesn't matter. And I just, again, this moment where it's not an audible voice. You know what I'm saying? It's more, best way I explain it. The best way I can explain when I tell people like, man, what does it feel like to hear from God? It's like I read the movie, The Book of Eli, with Denzel Washington, and it's this whole thing of where he probably does the best of explaining what it like. It's not this like audible. It's something within that you just know it's true, and also it's true because again, I say hear from God and I don't use that word lightly. A lot of times people in Christian culture use that just like, oh, I hear from God to just justify what they want. Like, no, I hold that very high, but it's like also it doesn't contradict like the Bible, right? And so in that moment, I heard did I tell you were done? I mean, literally, that's what I felt. And I was like, and it was one of those things where from there, I literally started feeling like it was this like I kept having these thoughts about going into corporate America. And I'm like, what the heck? And then within a few weeks of that, I get a phone.
For your persona.
Yeah.
Is not necessarily your starting point.
No, corporate America is definitely not me. And so anyway, I get a phone call a few weeks later from a friend who's like, hey, I got this guy, runs a hedge fund. They just bought this company. They're trying to figure out what to do. I told him about you. He wants to talk to you. I'm like, all right, cool. And so I just started like just talking to this guy. And then next thing you know, within 6 months, we're just out there. I've been building diverse worlds up until that point, but like going at that level, 18,000 employees, we're just rocking and we're going. And it was what it was. And so that was another moment. That was a moment recently. That was a moment in 2020. And then, I just recently had a moment to where I feel like there's this new thing that we're supposed to do. And
So outside of the little moments here and there where you've experienced clarity on what it is you need to focus on within like 2020 with DEI, what is the broader vision that you hope New Rules is known for? And what future will New Rules create for those that are listening to the podcast right now?
Yeah, I mean, this whole movement is about this. It's about unlocking authenticity, as we've defined it so many times here, helping people, organizations, cities, communities become self-aware, build infrastructures internally and externally to build resilience, to remain who they're supposed to be, and then use that ability and all that to empower other people and to empower those around them, right? Because I believe when you do that, you unlock human flourishing. I believe that those who are part of this movement, that you're part of the movement to help unlock human flourishing, not just to unlock you. When people think about authenticity, a lot of times in today's world, they think about themselves. They think about, I got to become authentic because I've got to know myself. I've got to know my calling, my purpose, all that. Yes, that is true. But like we say around here, your calling and purpose has everything to do with you and nothing to do with you, because what it should do is you should know who you are in order to go help others. And so that's what this movement's about. I want to see people be unlocked to go start a business that adds real value in this, in AI, right? I want to see businesses that may be in the idea of sanitation to, where, there's new companies doing that. There may be new people who are launching, but there's new tech that's coming out, for clean energy. It could be people who are doing nonprofit work, that wants to go in there and help raise up the next generation of entrepreneurship and help, create wealth among people who normally haven't had wealth, whatever it may be. Or it may be people unlocking authenticity in their family, where they've had a family where everyone's just performed, and now, flourishing happens because their kids are getting unlocked, their marriage is getting unlocked. That's what I want this to be. I want it to be to where it just becomes so organic that human beings, communities begin to flourish. And what I mean by flourishing is that it's better. They take a step up. They level up, not just in maybe physically, emotionally, spiritually, is that the environment, if you're part of this movement, the environment that you're in should be better. People should be better. The places you are should be better because you're there, because you're living out of this true place of authenticity.
To take that last point that you made, somebody gets to experience the essence of who we are for a day. Yep. So maybe they're completely foreign to what it is that we talk about, our culture, what we're about. Yep. They have a day where everything that we talk about is completely understood, yep, and it's leveraged within what they do. Yep. How is that person different because they've experienced us?
I think it's what we saw just before we did this. We had a client that we were working with and that we've been working with, and what's happened with this person who is an exceptional leader is that they've now, because they've been around and they, in that they've done work, done with all that, they have a healthier sense of self, which has now allowed what they're leading to be impacted. And what they've seen is that people who they're leading, they're getting better. And the people that they're leading, they're getting better simply by one person doing that. I believe that when you begin to genuinely understand who you are tough enough to remain that, and then you give that power away from your skill sets, your ability, it literally, it's like an infectious thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like a virus that continues to move and it spreads and it goes, because what you're doing, you're not taking. The thing about what we want to do is when you really have a genuine understanding of who you are, I don't have to take from you. I don't have to look. And taking means, okay, well, I'm in an environment. I can't be concerned what's going on with you because I need for you to validate me, or I need you to use your ability to fix what I need, or I need you to use your skill set, Bri, to go do this for me, versus like, if I'm in there and I know who I am, I can walk into a room and say, oh man, like I'm good. I don't need anything around me to validate me. I can just actually go and give it away. And the one thing is that when you're really confident in that and you know that, you're just willing to give stuff away and move and do it because there's an abundant world. That's the one thing I think that when you start to live this way, you start to realize how abundant the world is, and how when you begin to give away power, and what I mean by power, that means your skill. Everybody has power. Now, there are people with greater power, because we think about that. We always say, oh, it has to be somebody in political power or someone who has whatever. No, I believe every human being has power. That's why I think we were, again, I do believe in the Bible, because the Bible talks about right at the beginning that he says that God told humans to go in the world and subdue it. That's a powerful word. It's to take creation and put it under your control. Every human being has the ability to create. Every human being has the ability to make something. We're the only creatures that can imagine something and then go make it. Every human has that. And so what I tell people, when you go do that, man, it just leads to impact. So I know that's a lot, but I think that's what happens when you get around us, that other people begin to flourish as well because you're secure in who you are.
How do you connect unlocking authenticity to writing new rules?
Because I think that what happens in life, we end up boxing ourselves according to rules, right? What we end up doing is we start creating a scoreboard for a game. Most of the time what that looks like, let's say right here in the West, right here in America, it's usually going to be off of, and today, a few things. It'll be off of money. It'll be off of like maybe title. It'll also be after like status, followers now because of social media, things like that. And normally that's how we measure life. We measure life based off of that scoreboard. So it's like playing basketball. You have 3-point line, you have 2-point shots, right? And you have 1 point for free throws. Okay, so that's how you score the game. And so in a basketball game, you're playing in a game, you're going to score, over 60, 70, 80, 90 points. A soccer game is what? I mean, it's 3-1. It's because like what happens is that you have to begin to know what game you're playing. And what we'll tend to do is everybody thinks they're playing the same game, the status game, the money game, the finance game, whatever it is. And what if that's not your game? What if like your game is actually you are someone who's called to just create great art? And in that, you just love that, like you were just there to create great art. You know what? And you make a decent living. But the art that you bring to the world is just something that's beautiful. It's something that, man, the people who buy your art, man, it changes them. I mean, it's an expression of whatever. I mean, whatever that looks like. And now you're not measuring by, oh, well, I've created a Van Gogh painting that sold for $10 million. You're measuring off of, man, I want to put out every, their scoreboard could be every month. I want to put out what I believe is the most beautiful piece of art I can create. That's my scoreboard. Doesn't matter how it's, but this is my scoreboard. Great. That's their scoreboard. Or maybe your scoreboard is your family. Maybe it's like, man, I have lived and my family's been broken, and man, a scoreboard for me is for me and my spouse to make it to the end of our lives, to have kids who do that, to have grandkids who do that. That's their scoreboard. Okay, great. So you really build that, whatever it is. Then once you do that, you start building your rules to whatever game you're playing, and then you have the proper scoreboard. And so that's why we talk about writing the rules. Most people play by the rules society gives us. And so it's all just a chase. It's all about how much money you have, status, climb the ladder, next thing. And people aren't content in life. People get frustrated because they literally do not know what it means to win. If you were to go ask majority of people in life, I'll say, what does it mean for you to win? I'm like positive, 'cause I do it a lot. They can't answer it. They'll give some they'll hem and haw around the question. Oh, just being, man, be a good citizen. I want to make sure my kids or whatever. I'm like, no. Tell me, give me measurable things. What does it mean for you? At the end of your life, when you're sitting there, you're taking your last breath, you can say, yeah, dude, I actually won in life. And I think that's why you have to play by the rules that were meant for you, because everybody's game many times looks different.
That was a great answer. I think the individual that you mentioned in the beginning is a great example. Hopes that we can dive deeper into that later within 2025. But I think that is an incredible proof of concept. What do you think is the ingredients needed to create unlocking authenticity? Like, what ingredients does an individual need to have in order to be unlocked?
They have to be just coachable and teachable. I think that this is what drives me crazy, is that people who come to me sometimes, they'll come to me to help them. But then when I start saying, hey, it looks this way, then they argue with me. And it just pisses me off. I'm like, why are you afraid? Don't waste your time and or my time and or your money. Like, if I'm here, it's like going to a doctor and I'm going to I'm going to an orthopedic surgeon, and he's like, you know what, my knees. I'm like, well, you know what, I was watching, I stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night, so I freaking know. That's an old commercial, by the way.
I was like, wow, you really lost me there.
No, it's for anybody who's those old Holiday Inn Express commercial where people would stay at a Holiday Inn and the guy would be like, a guy would show up in a dentist's office. He's like, are you a dentist? He's like, no, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So it was like this whole thing. So you got to see the commercial. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
You had to be there.
You had to be there. All right, but here's what I'm saying. But it's like, people go and they'll come here and they want this until you start telling them how much you have to change. That's what it is. It takes two things. You have to be coachable, and then you're going to have toughness, because here's the thing. It's internal, relentless nature consistently to change, and the pain of that. And so when people get to the point of where their pain's too much to stay the same, that's when you can get to work, and they're coachable and they're willing to listen. People who've made real changes are those who I tell them what to do. Hey, here's what you do. Here's what I think. And they go and they apply it, and it just starts to happen for them. And they also are ready. I tell them it gets worse before it gets better. So normally we start just like they let the monster out the closet and all hell breaks loose in their life. And I come back to me. Yep, remember what we talked about. And then they fight through it, but they get better on the other side. And here's the thing. They feel greater levels of freedom. They start to enjoy what they're doing because because they're just starting to become more and more like alive, and they're living out of who they're supposed to actually be. I was reading something recently, Thomas Merton, this famous monk, and he makes a statement that's really powerful, and I truly believe this. He says, like, human beings are born false. And I truly believe that. We are born false. Now, he gets that. I believe that just from my theological bent, that the Bible talks about humans being born into sin and this whole thing. But like, human beings are born into you think about it, of just trying to cover up, fit in, doing all this stuff. And so if that's how you're born, you have to uncover that. And so most people just think that how they naturally, I'm just going to naturally find it. No, you have to actually work to excavate who you are. Because then not only are you born that way, then there's just real time, real events, real pain, real hurt, real stuff, real deception, whatever, that leads you down pathways that continue to bury who you are. And so I think it's coachability and this toughness to go through it.
Okay, so I'm glad you actually started going into resilience, because we started talking about a little bit about self-awareness in the beginning. When we talk about authenticity, we talk about self-awareness, resilience, and empowerment. So now you're touching some of the resilience piece of it. What is a moment that you realized writing new rules would demand everything from you, and how did you decide to continue moving forward?
It's crazy. I honestly, I always look back and now I can tell, but it's what I said before, man. My father never made impossible. He made impossible feel normal to me, because he did something that very few people did. It was being one of the first black head basketball coaches. Only literally there was 10 of them at that time. And I just was like, I thought it was normal. I never thought it was whatever. And so I think when I've done stuff, it was like, oh, this is normal. So like when I came back here and like I look at that moment, I didn't think it was crazy to be like, I'm starting a basketball academy here. I look back on it right now. It's insane. Like I came back to a city where people weren't doing basketball. Like, sports specific training is a multi-billion-dollar industry now. It was only tennis, baseball, and you were kind of wealthy. You had that. Like basketball, most people, majority of a lot of basketball, African Americans who play basketball. So it wasn't this like big wealthy sport or whatever. And I just saw the trend of what was happening in Europe and where I thought basketball was going. So my intuition saw where it was going. I was over there like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I came back. But starting it in a city where it's the third most popular sport, it's not really an industry. And not a big city, not this huge dense population where basketball's a big thing like Atlanta or, if I went to New York or Boston, wherever, in Midwest. And I come back here, and then on top of that, people were like, what is this? Trying to convince people, oh yeah, you should pay me to train your child to play basketball. And then on top of that, I was like, man, I want this to be a lasting thing. So I'm like, okay, I have to start where people got resources. So then I can actually never turn down a kid who may not have resources. So now I'm going into like affluent areas, trying to convince honestly white people that, hey, your kid, like to help get them better. And I wasn't promising them some pipe dream. I wasn't like, hey, Johnny's 4'2". He's going to get in the NBA one day. Like, no. But I was like, hey, but I know this, I'll maximize whatever his cap is, we'll get it out. It's like one of my favorite clients is like this girl by the name of Callie Bates.
Sorry, when you say whatever his cap is, we'll get it out, you mean he'll reach his maximum potential?
If he's willing to write, yeah, thank you. Like his maximum potential. Like one of my favorite clients is a girl named Callie Bateman. Callie was with me since she was in she was in 8th grade. She stayed with me all there. All Callie ever was she just wanted to be a starter on her high school basketball team, and that was it. And so she did. And like she started off she literally could not shoot past like 2 feet from the basket. By her senior year, she was starting. I think she maybe averaged like 8 or 10 points, all this stuff. Basketball kept her out of trouble. It taught her discipline. And even when I see her today, she's like in her 30s, she's got kids, all this stuff. It was one of those things where I'm like, that's what we did. My point in that, it was pushing against an industry, and it was pushing against even in Tallahassee where people were like, coaches didn't like me because they thought I was like, I was, who am I? We do this. And then I finally, one day I got fed up with it. I'm like, okay, if that's the case, then I'm not going to fight high school coaches. So I started focusing on 3rd through 8th grade. So I did 3rd through 8th grade. And what happened? Because I knew this. I would get them better. And then here's what would happen. People who thought they were the gatekeepers, they've been with me for 3rd decade. So now I am. So you have to come through me. And then here's what we did. We changed an entire community. In a community when it comes to basketball. Like that's one thing that like there's a lot of things I've done that I'm saying this now, I can say it, that I won't get credit for, but like we literally, what we built changed a complete community when it comes to basketball, where there was no Division I high major players coming out of here. We started producing them, and it changed kids' lives. And so my point in saying that, I knew in that moment, it's like, I didn't realize that was hard. It was like, yeah, it was opposition. Then we started church. I'm a black man in the South, and less than 1% of people do, like, black men pastor multi-ethnic churches. I just didn't see it. As I'm going through it, there was resistance. Then we jump into the corporate DEI space. Then it's always kind of been that way. But I gave this long part to just say, like, it never was like, when I'm in it, I didn't see it. It's like, oh, I'm going to have resilience to write the rules. I just kept, like, just moving. Even though I could feel the pain of it, now I can look back and be like, oh, no, you really have to have it. Because I think if I would have known that, I don't think I would have done it.
So what do you think gave you the edge, though? Because one of the things that I love about you is that you're so honest about your insecurities, what you face when you're struggling with how to weigh the cost of what it is that of what you want to do, and the things that are honestly holding you back. What do you think gave you like the ego, because you are not this super confident, arrogant, egotistical person, but there, even when you're talking right now, they're saying things that you're saying where you're like, I'm going to do it, so I'm going to be the gatekeeper now, and now you have to go through me. Like, there's an ego that comes with that is healthy, that I do think you have at a level. So can you share a little bit more about how you've developed it?
Yeah, because it became about others. I think that ego is bad when ego is about you. I think ego became a thing for me because I really started thinking about other people. I started thinking about people like JT, who's on our team, where people were telling me I was selling JT a pipe dream. This white kid, 6'2", wealthy, he's not going to do it. I'm like, why? So just because he's white, he can do this. And so you know what I did? And I'm competitive. So I was like, fine. And it was JT's dream to do this too. So I'm like, why wouldn't I give this kid a chance at his dream? And so we did it, and to a point to this, where again, and here's the thing, and for me, you know me a little bit of this part, but when you do that to me, I do still have the bark, but I'm petty. So like JT turned into an absolute killer. And here's what happened with him is like, I literally was letting everybody in the world know. They were like, oh man, I'm like, all right. I'm like, you guys been saying this stuff for a long time about this kid. Oh, he's the white kid on this side of town. I'm like, okay. And you know what? When there was, best player in the city. First team all state, went on to play high major basketball. The point was that in there, it was about JT. I wanted to help him. And then there was other kids, Chaz Dudley. And then there became kids like Zim, who's now at Jacksonville. There became Hannah Schutz. There became, you look at guys now, again, who was up art in our family, but they, you got Trey Donaldson, and you got, I go on and on about guys, Quan Jackson, all these guys whose lives were impacting change because they were part of what we did. And so, to this day, so it's all, I think ego happens when it's about other people.
By nature, writing new rules is quite outlandish. What do you think that it is about new rules right now that most people reject?
I think what people reject is to write new rules in the world we're heading into. It has to be internal and then external. We've been able to, because of how the world was shaped, we've been able to you could actually put on a front and be pretty successful. You didn't have to really be have any awareness. You could just be, okay, I got a skill set, I just do that skill set and that's it. And that was the measuring stick and that was the board. Now, because the world is incredibly disrupted, there's from finance to geopolitics to, everything is changing. No, this is the moment where who you really are has to come out. And so I think people don't want to do that because it's easy to just try to change the externals versus doing the hard work internally. And that's what people reject. And so when I start talking, and it's slow work to get there, so people just fight. And they're like, well, this isn't doing this, and just teach me this and do whatever. I'm just at a point right now to where now I have so many marker points of seeing that it works. So I'm like, you don't have to do it. It's fine. You know what? That doesn't mean you're not going to have success in your life or whatever thing you want to do. But for me, I'm just not interested in that because I feel like that, man, I want to work with people and I want to help do things, people who really genuinely want to bring real things to the world. And that doesn't, and again, I'm not talking about people like, oh man, they got billion-dollar companies. I'm like, it's somebody, man, who wants to run a small business to really impact their city through, maybe lawn care or a moving company or whatever. Okay, great, man, what's the scoreboard? What does that look like? Why do you want to do it? And they may be like, oh man, I want to be able to do this. I want to eventually pass this down to my kids so then they can do this. Okay, well then let's start building that out now. Those are the things, but that takes internal work because what's going to happen? Somebody says, look, I'm thinking generations down the line. Well, when you're living in the moment right now, you got to have toughness because you're going to start seeing other people pass you by, but you're running a different race than they are. And so I think people, they fight the internal stuff they have to do in order to write new rules and the hard work of that. And that's kind of what it is.
The hardest rules to disrupt are often the ones that we don't want to believe exist. Mm-hmm. What do you believe is a hidden rule that we as a society, as a culture, exists right now that most people aren't really willing to accept that it exists as a problem?
I think it comes down to simply this. People today, when they think of themselves, what they think they are, whether there's evidence or not, right, then they believe that's who they are. And a lot of times they don't have evidence of that. And they just believe because I feel this way and I think I'm this or I want to be this, my intentions are this, then that's who I am. And it's not true. Your life tells you, as we read earlier, your life tells you who you are. And most people, it's this unwritten rule today where people do that. They believe if I have a mental belief about something, then that's who I am. And it's just not true. I can say all day, man, I can have a mental belief that, I'm the fittest dude on the planet. Well, I'm not. Okay. So it's like my mental belief is that, but I'm not. It's evidence of what's there. And I think that's what's hurting a lot of people. And what's funny to me is that it doesn't matter what side of political aisle you sit on. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a conservative. I see conservatives who do that. They believe they have this belief of that they are whatever. And then when real life gets to going, there's no evidence. Where I see people, I feel this way and this is who I am. Like there's no evidence of that. And I think it's one of the biggest things that's hindering our country. I think it's one of the biggest things that's hindering people from actually walking in, and it's impacting mental health because people are living a false lie, and reality is bumping up against that, and they don't know what to do because all of a sudden I was just told this whole thing that we've been bought into this lie in our country that, man, whatever you believe, you can become. And it's freaking false. It's absolutely not true because reality will tell you something completely different. You can be what you've been designed to be, not what you hope to be, but you can be what you were designed to be.
Where do our choices dictate who we become? Because in the beginning you talked a little bit about your theological belief in power. Every human being has power. And so at some level, it's also true that we can shape some of who we are based off of the choices that we make. So how do you navigate the nuance of what you just said in that second piece?
Because I think individuals have an inherent calling, things they're actually supposed to. And I don't think that's a job. I mean, it can manifest as a job, but I think it's bigger than just a job.
And most people dumb it down to being specifically a job.
Yes, I'm supposed to be an engineer. Like, no, you could take that skill set or whatever. What about engineering and move that to like working in, software programming, or work that in a basketball culture or whatever it may be. Now, here's the deal. The other part is this. I think then it becomes like talent, skills, and ability, right? So just think about an athlete. LeBron James is 6'8", 255 pounds. Like LeBron James can work, like have the thought and the action to where I'm going to be this super fast, quick guard, like a Kyrie Irving, right? And he could do all the work and stuff like that. Because of his literally like stature and how he's been made, he's never going to be like that of Kyrie Irving. It doesn't mean, but LeBron James is probably, again, he's like one of the best to ever play basketball. But again, I think your talent, your skills matter. So that's why when you make choices, it needs to be lined up with your gifts and your talents as well. Because let's just say you're not a great communicator. Why would you spend your time? I'm just going to get better. Okay, but you're only going to get like 50% or 60 versus like, man, I'm an incredible writer. Well, then why wouldn't you go do that? Because that's going to make more impact. A lot of times why we go down these roads of things we're not great at is because it's trying to fulfill a void in us of getting approval, acceptance, status, whatever it is, because we feel this type of people get this type of status versus you being okay with who you are. And I can tell you that as somebody who had to walk through that. A lot of my life is underground, and I hate that. A lot of my life and things, like I said earlier, like that I've been able to help change, affect, people will never know about. Where literally institutions were saved because they are helping them make a decision that no one will ever know about. And so in that's hard for me because why? I want shine. I want you to know that I was the guy who did this for this specific place, right? But I realize a lot of my work is meant to be unseen. And the reason why is because what I will do, if I don't do that, I always tell people, God will use your calling to kill the idolatry of your heart. God will use your calling to kill the idolatry of your heart. For me, my calling is going underground to help people. My idolatry, I want you to worship me. And so he puts me in places that are unseen, influencing people that people have no idea that I'm doing it, because it kills the idols. Because what happens when you have an idol in your life, that becomes the thing you worship, and it becomes about you and not about other people.
And the only reason why I bring up the other extreme of things, because I do think we also have some listeners, especially those in a Christian, maybe traditional setup, where the belief is that my future's in God's hands. Like, God has a call for me, and, regardless, that is going to happen. So I did want to bring in some of the other perspective.
Well, here's the thing. It's the same thing that we saw where, I got this call, man, like, this idea of writing the rules. I could have made the choice not to do anything. We read the Bible, and somebody they call the father of faith, Abraham, all we know is the Bible tells us God called Abraham to leave where he was from, to go to a place, a land that he didn't know, but he says, I'm going to make your descendants numerous, a seashore, or the sand of the seashore, blah, 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 blah. And it's like Abraham he had no kids. All we know is that Abraham could have said, I heard God say that, but I'm staying back here in Ur. I'm not going to go. He had to make a choice, and that's the idea in the mystery, because I believe that freedom of choice is what makes us human. It gives us dignity. I think that's why we have it. It gives us dignity when you can make a choice. So you're right. It can't just be, well, it's all in God's hand. Yeah, it is. But then when he says something, what are you doing? You have to actively move in that direction.
Okay, so since this idea of writing new rules has presented itself to you, and you've been formulating practices, you've been formulating your personal internal structures that help you make sure that you are living accordingly to what it is that you believe that you're supposed to accomplish. As you've been practicing writing new rules, disruption, what limitations have you personally been freed from?
It's a great question. I think one, I've been free from the fact that I have to do everything. Feeling like that I had to be the one involved with everything versus maybe I'm the one who I was just there to inspire a thought that created something else. Or I have to be the one to, here's another one that I think sometimes I had a limiting belief about my own like value and worth. And because of that, what it led to many times is that the organization hasn't grown because I was always worried about, like I was so tied to it. So like, what's going to happen to me if it grows, whatever. And I think sometimes I put a limiting belief. So I think some of that stuff, as I started to become aware of it, no, I got to get more power away. No, I got to go do this so that we can actually grow. So it no longer allows me to go in the lanes and the things I actually really, really love to do. There
are a few questions that I think many people find themselves asking themselves. Like, how do I avoid burnout? How do I build wealth? And though we don't explicitly acknowledge answers to those questions, I fully believe that the premise of the topics we discuss on every single episode that we discuss every day throughout our lives, they help empower people to answer those questions for themselves. Would you say that you agree? And how do you think that we empower people to think about that?
I think that everybody wants people to tell them what to do instead of actually doing the hard work to listen to what you've been designed and called to do. I think everyone then wants to be experts of everybody else versus being an expert of themselves. Everyone's limits are different. Everyone's callings are different. Seasons of time are different. And I think because we live, sometimes we don't critically think, we try to make everything fit in the box. When you don't critically think about and why we want people, we don't give all these answers. We give breadcrumbs, we give themes, we give like, hey, here's a practice. Because when you can do that, you can begin to think about your own life, where you're at, what's going on, and to make sure and to have the checks and balances to make sure you are thinking right. Because here's the truth is that for some people, they may be in a season of their life to where they're supposed to just really, really drop their head and work a lot of hours. And I think there's nothing wrong, but what some people are like, oh no, you gotta have balance. That may not be where they're supposed to be right now, but there may be later in their life where they're gonna be, they're having a season of time where they're gonna do that. And then they may have another season. I think that that's where we always are talking. I think people have to just become concerned with what lane are you running? What are you called to? Because what you're called to is just different than other people. And what we want to do is we want everybody else. This is what I think about the whole burnout culture thing, is I think there was real people, real things that happen to people. I think now we want other people. We talk about burnout because we want to justify our lack of work and effort. And so I can just then talk about someone, well, everybody's doing this, they're burnt out, this whole hustle culture, whatever. And was there a problem with that? 100% it was. But my whole thing is this. But at the end of the day, now it's gone the complete other way. And I'm just like, dude, worry about what's going on with you. Not worry about what's going on with everybody else. If somebody wants to work their face off and do that, that's their business. If they get burned out, that's on them that they got burned out. Because you know what happens with burnout? It's not because of the work. Like I always say this, and it drives me crazy. We do not have blue collar workers burning out. Like blue collar work dudes out there, like on the asphalt concrete, laying down roads in Florida when it's 1,000,000 degrees outside. They're not going home like, "Whoo, boy, I'm burnt out, man. I need I need a mental health day." No, they're doing what they do. Burnout is when internally, I think your motives and your intentions are often wrong. You're doing things from the wrong place, and then what you end up doing is you carry more emotional burden, more emotional worry than it is. Burnout is not about work. It's about the emotional stuff you carry, and a lot of times we carry unhealthy stuff because we aren't self-differentiating. We literally carry other people's crap that's none of our business. And I think because of that, that's why they get burnt out, quote unquote, because of just the emotional stuff they carry. And I can tell you that I'm saying that as somebody who literally is a recovering person from it. I fully get it. But most people aren't even freaking close to it. They're not even close to it. And I just think that our work that we do is to actually help people really think on their own. But most people don't. They say they want to be able to think on their own, but it just takes a lot of time, and they don't. They really just want you to tell me the answer, and then we go from there.
You mentioned a little bit about New Rules being underground. Yeah. 10 years from now, do you want New Rules to be world renowned?
I would want New Rules to be world renowned if being world renowned gives us the ability to unlock more people. But if being underground allows us to unlock more people, then I'd rather be underground. That's the whole thing for me. At the end of this day, I want to see more and more people, communities, individuals be unlocked. And so however we can move and make that happen the fastest, that's what I actually want to be able to do.
Yeah. If New Rules was world renowned, what would you want or underground, what would you want the headline to be about New Rules that really marks it? There's something in your mind.
It is, and it's like I'm jumping like from thing to thing, and it could be this, it could be this. For New Rules, it is, what people would say, it is really that they are a movement that genuinely is about humanity being better.
We always say, unlock human flourishing.
Unlock human flourishing. That's what I would say about New Rules. Have something different for my own life.
Oh, so what's for your own life?
My own life, and this is probably my ego, and this is that part for me. It's a lyric, and so please, I probably will get heat for this, but it comes from Jay-Z. God did. It was the idea that I'll read it. All right, so please, if you have to beep this out, Lauren, or whatever, you just do it.
Oh, you're going to say it.
Okay. 100% I'm going to say it. If I could put a lyric to my life, it would be this. I'm just going to take out a name and put my name there. Adrian is a real nigga's dream. My only goal is to make real niggas feel seen. Sometimes it make fake niggas hate life. Never my intention. It's just the consequences of my way of life.
I kind of have tears in my eyes because I know what that means to you.
Yeah, that when my life is that I think at the end of the day, it's like, and I'll never forget hearing that lyric by Jay-Z. And again, people have whatever, but it really was. It's like I was listening to that song, and it was like this experience for me because it was that. It's like my intention is never to make people feel some type of way. But when you really live from a place of knowing who you are, it's just the consequences of your way of life. But my whole goal is to make people, like real people, feel seen. They can feel seen by being exactly who they're supposed to be and launching them into being that. And that's the goal. And the only way that happens is by me actually being that and our team being that and doing that and the thing you do. And then you launch people out there. So, yeah, those are like if you ask me, if I could put outside of a Bible verse, like Matthew 6:33, if you ask me to put something on my tombstone or something like that, it'd probably be those lyrics or whatever. But yeah, that's what it is.
Well, I will say, I think, and we can talk a little bit more about this off the podcast, but for what it's worth, I had this moment the other evening where I was feeling super appreciative of the podcast, and I sent a message to everyone on our team, and I also sent a message to you, and somehow that time, like, for me, evolved into something a little bit more, and I was just on the verge of tears, just thinking about this next year, and specifically thinking about you and what it is that I think is going to happen. I think that there are many things that you've done in silent, prayers that you've prayed, people that you've helped. And I think that 2025 is really going to be a year where a lot of those things are answered. So I'm grateful for you, and I'm excited.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do. I think there's something different that is there, and it's kind of starting to happen. But, at the end of the day, I've learned, man, what's in your hands, whatever's in your hands, then get to work with what's in your hands and multiply that and just keep going. And I just think that there is that. I think that, people always ask the question. It's like, man, like, I want God to, I want God to use my life. I want to be used or whatever. I don't think God is in heaven looking down at people and being like, you know what? I like you. You suck. I like you. I'll use you. You suck. I like you. I think what he's looking for is people willing to be used, like willing to surrender their life so that he can use them for the betterment of humanity. And so that's where, again, I have tried as best I can to position myself to do that. And at times I have done that. At times I have done things out of my own selfish intention or whatever, and God's very gracious to correct me and then move on and not discard me. And I just think that there's been a lot of years of these things, of doing things in silence and working, and I think a lot of things are starting to come to pass. But I think that, honestly, I feel confident. I feel like he can trust me to use what he's given me because I just want to go give it away. It's not that, and I think you get blessed in the midst of that. And what I mean by blessed, I'm not talking about financial, that's part of it, but I think about friendships, relationships, I think impact, whatever. I think he does. And so I just know, man, I just want to give it away. Like, I want to create the stuff to go give and give and give more. So I think that hopefully that's what's going to happen, and we'll go do it.
Thank you for sharing.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So, hey, guys, I hope today was actually helpful. Again, this was honestly one of my favorite ones that we've recorded. And so this upcoming year, there's going to be exciting things coming with our New Rules community. We're actually going to, start having guests who are going to come on to the New Rules podcast. We're going to just continue to have a lot more free-flowing things that we're going to talk about, ideas we're working through. You're going to be hearing more in the future about what's really new in our New Rules community, and maybe even things that actually can help you in the future. So until next time, keep writing New Rules.